Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am between you and lunch. That's always some place to be, so I won't run over. I come from Jisc Legal, and our job is to stop any legal issues being a barrier to the adoption of appropriate technology for appropriate uses in teaching and learning. So my job today is to try and sort out the flare points, if you like, where law meets bring your own device and mobile device technology. This has been a big subject for us at Jisc Legal over about the past year, and we've got a whole big toolkit of resources available, and I'll give you a flavour of those and highlight some of the important bits and pieces. I'm not shy, as the image may demonstrate, so please do heckle as part of the presentation. Another way of interacting will be by using the voting pads that hopefully that you have on your table. I have no idea what the range is, the RF range of these voting pads, so at the back you might have to press those buttons quite hard. Of course, for data protection reasons, I have to say that all these voting pads are now linked to your staff development record, and any wrong answers may reduce your salary next month. But don't worry about it. And that's, using the voting pads, if you decide to change your mind at any point, you just need to press the correct button after you press the duff button, and it will register that. Great, eh? I've been at Jisc Legal now for 9 years and 1 day. That's not that I'm counting. And so hopefully I can bring an experience. We deal with the whole of the UK's college and university sectors. So hopefully I've got a good few stories to tell. Of course, I have fixed it today so that the Information Commissioner's Office levied a fine of £150,000 against Glasgow City Council, announced this morning, you may have seen, for the loss of 2 laptops, one of which contained details of 20,000 people, including 6,000 with their bank details, unencrypted laptops, and they were already subject to an enforcement notice for bad practice with regards to mobile devices. I'm pleased to say that education actually does pretty well in data protection terms, so in compliance we do our best and we do pretty well. And so we're thankful to the government sectors for keeping all the attention away from us, on the whole, though we do it well. We are a shared service, and you've already paid for Jisc Legal, so please do use us. We have a help desk you can contact, so if you think of any questions after this, then please do get in touch. We like to know what's troubling you or where you might have concerns. For your interest, we spend about, I reckon, a third of our time dealing with actual legal issues. We spend about a third of our time dealing with legal opportunities, things that you could do if you knew a bit more about the law, and a third of the time we spend dispelling myths where people make up their own versions of law to stop them doing stuff, which I find very interesting. We are not a government-funded solicitor service, even though we are mostly legally qualified within the service. But our job is to fill a niche, and that is giving you information to allow you to take decisions. If you want to explain a situation to someone and get them to take a decision about your legal path, then you're looking for professional legal services in terms of solicitors and paying for them. We offer information. So, for example, if you're IT director, if you're an IT director and you stab your principal, then, well, we can't tell you whether that's murder or not. We can tell you if you stick a knife in someone and they die as a result, that would be murder. You have to decide whether it's those circumstances. We're good at hints. Try not to stick knives in senior staff. We have a whole mobile technologies and the law section, which is recently populated, or filled, I think used to be the word. You remember when things were recorded rather than captured? Anyway, the mobile technologies and the law section with top tips and checklists and a template policy and things like that. So hopefully you don't have to do the work again. We've done that. But we're happy to take bespoke questions as well. Any of you feeling particularly mobile could run up here and use your QR code reader, or you could Google for SlideShare Jisc Legal, or you could Bing. Is that a verb? To Bing, I don't know. So good luck with that. Or you can use your favourite search engine and use it, looking for SlideShare and Jisc Legal, and you'll find the mobile technologies and the law presentation, which is similar to this one here. So if you want to follow as you go along. Right, let's get to the voting then. Have you heard of Jisc Legal before? This is the warm-up icebreaker using your buttons question. You got a choice of hello again, Jason. Yes, fairly often. yes, used occasionally. 4, vague acquaintance. 5, what's that then? Before today, did you hear of us? Oh, we're getting a good number of votes there. It's actually working, the system. Excellent. 26. It's counting. It's a netbook. It takes a while to count. Oh, that's good. This is used to set the performance-related pay of my communications assistant back in the Jisc Legal. Unfortunately, well, she's getting about half pay next month. That's not bad. It's better than before. We tend to be a plumbing service. Unfortunately, people tend to come to us when they've got a problem. It's probably a good idea actually to put some lagging on the pipes beforehand. So if you could make sure that you have people in your institution that are thinking about legal issues, sign up to our free once a month email newsletter where we have each news story has something about what you need to do as a result of each story, because that's what you really want to know. Then please make sure there's someone signed up. I think that each institution does at least have one person signed up. So the communications assistant might get all her salary next month. How are you doing with legal issues then, do you feel then? When it comes to legal issues, I'm confident, I have a fair idea, I dabble, I ask others, I hide in the toilet. Unfortunately, there's probably not sufficient RF frequency range to vote from the toilet, so number 5, but let's see where we're at with this. Okay, that's not bad. That's, yes, I have the usual bell curve. Oh, and very rare do we get anyone expressing confidence. I won't ask you that. That's, yeah, anyway. I'm sure that's true. I'll ask, I'll find out who that 4% was and ask them questions. Okay, there's some questions about, well, why think about this? Because if you're in any way involved with either setting up the technology or using the technology, you'll probably know that when it comes to bring your own device and mobile devices, then getting Apple, Android, Unix, Linux, Windows, and that's another system, systems all connected up and working and configurable is a nightmare in itself. So we'll forget about the legal issues, but don't forget about the legal issues. Because actually, after you've invested all this time in setting up your brand spanking new system of smart Wi-Fi points and all the rest of it, then you want to make sure that there's not disruptive events that go on with it. And you want to get the policies in place. You want people to make acceptable use of it. You want to be able to take the right decisions so that you have a high quality, enduring, sustainable system in terms of the legal parts as well. I wouldn't really want to be the person at Glasgow City Council this morning that's sorting out their 150 grand, and plus they've got an enforcement notice to deal with, which means that they're going to get an awful lot of visits from the ICO. So and that's not the sort of thing that is conducive to getting on with developing your technology. One good point, by the way, is we seem to have noticed at Jisc Legal that your proximity to Wilmslow in Cheshire, I think it's Cheshire, is actually, the closer you are, the more the ICO is going to look at you. That's where the Information Commissioner's office is. And being in Shetland would be very good in terms of being ignored by the ICO, it seems. Anyhow, and that's perhaps. That's, sorry, before I get to the legal bill for defamation accusation, sorry, back a slide. Yeah, so compliance is all about confidence. It's not about avoiding hugely bad things happening, though there have been some fairly big fines. It's more about the disruption and about setting the example and showing that you've done it, and actually being proud of the fact that as a sector, we tend to do pretty well. It's going to be about reputation. It's also going to be about resilience of your system in some ways, but you don't want students doing nasty things to each other over the technology that you've set up. And you want to also take a sensible approach to it. Again, Jisc Legal decided to adopt webcasts as one of our ways of communicating, live broadcasts over the internet, and we thought this was great. The problems that we had when we started them about 7 years ago with the number of institutions that had entirely blocked all streaming media. I remember once going through, again, all the firewall issues with one college, and only then at the end did they say, oh, by the way, we block all streaming media. Is that the reason why it's not working? Oh, well, yes. That's it. And again, you can actually avoid all problems whatsoever by just pulling all the plugs out, blocking everything. That's it. And nothing should be a problem in terms of legalities. But, well, actually, compliance with your accessibility duties might come up. But, or actually running an institution might be an issue. But again, keep it in perspective and don't go over the top. Again, there's this strange phenomenon we find that people like to ramp up legal issues to be incredibly difficult and to be showstoppers when often they require a little bit of thinking about, well, why is all this law bad, to how can we get on with it? I prefer how can we get on with it. All right, here's my question then. I've got a mate who's he hosts a server, and this is not directly about mobile devices, but just to give you an idea of scale, and he's ended up, unfortunately, at the end of an accusation about defamation. It was a poster who made a post to a discussion list that's hosted on his server. And he's trying to sort this out. There is a few legal issues to be dealt with. What do you think the legal bill currently is for this? You've got a choice of, the solicitors will do it for free, 65 pence, £6.50, £6.5 grand, or 6.5 million. Press your buttons now. Okay, you've all pressed 4, I take it. Oh, right, that 13%, I want you as a client. Where are you? I want you to sign you up now. If you think you should be paying that amount, well, probably shouldn't. Do it for free. Oh, only if. Not a chance. Yes, that's 6.5 grand, and that's probably a baseless accusation, but because the risks are high. So even though you get things right, that's not enough. You want to be confident as well. So what are the issues? First of all, one that doesn't come up immediately, because the second one, data protection, tends to be the most obvious, but copyright is actually one of the things that needs to be thought about, because not all the resources that you will have will be licensed for delivery over mobile to people's own devices. And that can be for various reasons. It can be because they have to be delivered on a particular platform, and that the platform app hasn't been designed for all the devices available. But it could be because of geographical limits, and those of you involved in library acquisition, e-resource acquisition, will know that actually sometimes there are geographical limits involved. Sometimes that's a historical accident in ways. For example, the ERA license about recording broadcasts, because of basically a statutory legacy, that is either going to be limited to your campus or with the Plus license to the UK. Now that's a bit difficult, and you can use GeoIP to police that, but when it comes round to deciding where a mobile device is, it becomes a bit more tricky, and so we have to start watching this. So those who are acquiring need to be up to speed on the fact that you're somewhere else in the institution, someone's trying to develop the accessibility of, to do with BYOD in mobile devices, and marry the two up to make sure that they match. I was at an institution that spent an awful lot of time, about 12 years ago, dealing with bandwidth issues about delivering resources to Malaysia, because Malaysia had a small pipe, as I understood it, and we had a big wire, but they had a small wire, so we had to get stuff that would go down the small wire. So they worked on all sorts of compression and techie stuff. And then I turned up at a meeting, and I was actually there at the meeting to discuss something else. And I happened to say, I caught the end of someone's presentation about the big wire, little wire stuff. I happened to say, has anyone checked the licenses for whether these materials can be delivered in Malaysia? And there was a bit of a silence. And it turned out that most of the e-resources at that time were not deliverable to Malaysia. And so they had wasted years dealing with a technical issue, and they had another issue to deal with, which they hadn't even started on, about the licenses for these resources. In fact, yesterday I just heard about a university that somewhere had signed an agreement allowing just about everyone in to use all library resources, where unfortunately the e-resource licenses in question just don't allow that. So that's a marriage that's going to have to be made. Data protection, respecting privacy, obviously. E-safety, protecting users. Again, once upon a time, if I left the confines of the college, then anything that happened between me and another person was not really the college's concern. Whereas if the college now organises, and this does happen, for the students to all swap mobile phone numbers, then that's persistent access to the person. And e-security as well, about protecting the organisation. So what's the difference? What's the new world in terms of law? Well, it's the same old law. We don't have a mobile device law. Well, first of all, the fact that our access isn't linked to place. It's personal, invasive, and pervasive. It's there all the time. Actually, it dawned on me the other day that my wife is away from me during the day, obviously, Whereas my mobile phone, I wonder when the last time my mobile phone was more than 10 meters away from me. Actually, that's, yeah, amazing. Normally my mobile phone is in my sporran, and that's a mobile hotspot in itself. But that's, anyway, let's move on from there. It's about own device. Once upon a time, there was control and ownership by the institution, that loss of control, and it combines access and communication. Don't all connect to my sporran at once, by the way. That's causes bandwidth issues. Right, what's the biggest issue about mobile then, would you say? How would you rate it? Copyright, data protection, e-safety, e-security, or haggis? Some say that I like to have 5 options, and sometimes I'm a bit stretched to think of a 5th. I thoroughly deny that accusation. Oh, gosh. A quarter of you have problems with, 15% have problems with haggis. Interesting. Well, actually, I have a friend who happens to be a network engineer, and he had problems because he had an interfacing issue with about a bottle and a half of whiskey. And then in his tent, he had, he regurgitated a lot of data all at once, shall we say. And he had made the beginner's mistake of leaving his iPhone 5 next to his bed. And seemingly, and he'd had a big haggis meal the night before, and seemingly regurgitated haggis and iPhone 5 as an incompatibility. So that's my top tip from today. That's iPhone 5 out of reach. Well, that's when you've had a lot of haggis accompanied by whiskey. I think getting all these in perspective, none of them are showstoppers. They all have things to be thought about. I like the fact that it's a broad spectrum across there shared out. I think that's right. I think they're all pertinent and all need to be dealt with. And partly it'll depend who in your institution is dealing with each part. They'll have their different focuses. And one of the issues I think you have as providers, if you're from a provider, is how you get the bits to join up and talk. The Information Commissioner on the data protection issues, but it does apply to the rest as well, said 47% of all UK adults now use their personal smartphone, laptop or tablet computer for work purposes, but less than 3 in 10, or should it have been fewer? I'll leave that thought with you. Less than 3 in 10 who do so are provided with guidance on how their devices should be used in this capacity, raising worrying concerns that people may not understand how to look after the personal information accessed and stored on these devices. Again, I won't ask how many of you have used mobile devices or your own mobile devices for work purposes and have had guidance, but luckily enough, if I press a 3-key combination on here, my phone explodes, and therefore I think that's what happens anyway with Avast security, but it will stop any personal information being divulged, like those photographs from 3 nights ago. Anyway, that's yeah, I won't do a lot for it. And there are other, perhaps, collateral damages involved there. Anyway, copyright mobile devices, I'll just tease out a few other issues. How to be appy. Oh, I had to get a cringe-worthy pun in there, but how to appy. Again, I was talking earlier on, again, I think we'll move away from dedicated apps and open standards will be the way forward. But for the moment, anyway, a lot of providers are deciding which apps to adopt and to promote and use. And one thing to watch is that some apps, and a lot of apps, in fact, started off from the consumer market. The distribution of them was for personal individual use. We're now seeing a bit more sophisticated business models where you now have licensing available for institutions and organizations. Be careful about, especially individuals, outliers, enthusiasts at your institution or in your organization, adopting things which are just for personal or domestic or individual use as an organizational tool. That's where issues can happen. And actually, that can build up to some fairly big amounts of money. One recently that I liked was NBC in America. They had a subsidiary that was using the Chalet font, which is not a particularly uncommon font, and they had licensed it for use between, I think, 70 users. And they paid their fees for that, and it was used. The parent company, big, huge organization, decided our subsidiaries using Chalet, we'll just use it as well. Not considering the fact that fonts are actually subject to copyright as well and are licensed. They ended up settling for $3.5 million, that case, for the use of a bloody font. And Chalet, I think, that comes with Microsoft Office, does it? There's a question. I think it is. It's free to use as part of that, and free to use in many contexts. And again, one of the gotchas that we see is where people in many institutions think Googling or Binging for, I'm going to have to use that, for royalty-free image is a way to solve all problems, but they don't read the terms and conditions that invariably say for personal, non-commercial use only, and they can get caught. Yeah, there can be some. So you need to look at terms and conditions of what's being used to make sure it's appropriate, especially for mobile device use outside your institution onto own devices, because they are all possible barriers. Also, you're going to have to look at pricing models, and again, not all distributions of apps and indeed resources come with suitable business models yet for us. Sometimes, for example, again, the annoying one for us is where you're forced to buy a license per user, knowing that the app or the resource is going to be used for 1 week a year by about 200 students for 1 week. Then a yearly license for all 200, or for a whole institution, sometimes necessary. Again, all we can do is, there's nothing legally you can do about that, but you can go back and try and exert customer pressure, economic pressure to be able to get that changed. All right, here's a good question for you. Do you have a mobile device with copyright infringing content with you, on you at the moment? That's can I call me a lawyer? Maybe. I'm looking around and seeing what option others are pressing. Yes, definitely not. Gov honest. Okay, thank you very much. There'll be those who press 1 to 4 and then the liars. Oh, there we go, that's it. Oh, I'll meet up with 22%, see if I can find any infringing content on your mobile device then. If you've looked at a web page, you browse the web on your device, you probably have some infringing content. Not everything on the web has been neatly cleared, and even if people have been trying to be compliant, then the chances are that somewhere the chain has been broken. For myself, I have the entire, I'm sure you do as well, the entire back catalogue of Girls Aloud, and that's, as every person should have, should really be a public good, but for the moment, we haven't nationalised Girls Aloud. Anyway, I have bought all the CDs, and I've ripped them onto my mobile phone because I wouldn't want to be away from my Girls Aloud collection. And nothing in law currently allows me to do that. We're going to see some changes to the law that probably will allow that pretty soon, but for now it's not. So I have an illegal lot of Girls Aloud stuff on my mobile phone. That's, but I chose to do that. Girls Aloud have had enough of my money and the record companies, so I decided it was fair and I took that decision. Again, it's not a perfect world, so we have to be able to make decisions in terms of copyright about where we're encroaching and infringing on the reasonable expectations and rights of copyright owners, and also where we're likely to get stung as well. I don't know if anyone's had any invoices from Getty Images. They use automatic image searching, and they're bloody good. That's it, finding stuff. And £800 invoices are pretty common. That's people sticking stuff up. And the other one I like is Ordnance Survey. I once, for a friend, created a little map, and I may have used an Ordnance Survey map as a sort of initial base for my thing. I used a number of tools on this map to smudge it up a bit and make it not like an Ordnance Survey map, and then put it on their webpage, which was about a caravan they had for hire, actually, and where it was. And a week later, I got an email from the Ordnance Survey saying, would you like to license the use of a map? I thought, that's clever. Of course, watermarking and all the rest of it's there. So I decided, nah, I'll just draw my own map. Yeah. But yeah, the search mechanisms are cleverer, and also there are people looking out for it. And also, I'm afraid, as publishers and creators of content change their business models, they're going to be looking for your use of stuff. And so if they know your stuff is being delivered to mobile devices, to own devices, and that's not covered, then they'll be asking you for that extra license, I can assure you. Yes, thank you. Data protection and bring your own device. Okay, we've already heard a bit about it. We tend to do pretty well, but it's remembering about what stuff can be on the device. Can be sensitive stuff. So, for example, I have general email work email on my mobile phone, but if you email our help desk admitting to fraud, whatever, particular criminal activity, then that does not arrive on my mobile phone. The help desk one does not go there. Of course, the fact that you can know where all your students are is quite fun. And again, I saw a demonstration of Wi-Fi networks, which demonstrate the ability to see what people were doing via their own devices, etc. And you might, if you're technically minded, might know better than I, all the network monitoring. So you can see that Jason Miles Campbell spent 6 hours on YouTube. And that's, I've been researching Girls Aloud for work on Tuesday and stuff like that. So of course, with mobile devices, you can link it up to Place as well. E-safety and mobile communications, again, it's the fact that, well, again, we've had harassment cases. You as institutions where you have evidence of criminal activity, your job is to, first of all, get in touch with the police. Your job is not to investigate crime or have to sort out what's crime and what's not, so deal with the police. And there are some USISA guides as well that are very useful for that. You have a duty to make sure that you're taking care. So a recent example was good use of Facebook in terms of group work, not a good use when the tutor decided to give the marks back via Facebook as open postings that friends and family could see and all the rest of it. There has to be a little bit of care there. E-security and mobile devices, BYOD, of course, bring your own device. BYOVRD, bring your own virus-ridden device. That's, of course. Again, you can cause damage to other people's data and devices potentially. By this, and losses caused by loss of data. So again, we tend to be pretty good in practice, but again, making sure for our own security and security of others that we take the reasonable precautions. LYOD, lose your own device. Yeah, so that's, as I say, Glasgow City Council. Borders Council gave us a good example. 250,000, I think they were fined. They were disposing of stuff, and they weren't really tracking what was happening with the disposal company. The disposal company, their shredder had got jammed, so social work records got left outside a recycling paper bank in a Tesco car park because the paper bank was full. So that, in combination with other problems, led to that. But talking about mobile devices and bring your own, then obviously we know that laptops can get lost. From this morning's BBC story, 73 laptops in Glasgow City Council are currently location unknown, possibly stolen. But going back about 15 years, the University of Bristol had a project looking at, and it was researching child abuse, and they had a number of laptops used for collecting information. The project funding ended, people went off elsewhere. Nobody actually paid attention to where the laptops went to. They were eventually sold by the university, not knowing what was on it, and one ended up with a BBC journalist. And again, University of Bristol was in the situation of these devices with details of child abuse on them, personal information, sensitive personal information about that, were in the hands of the public. Don't want that sort of accident. So, we need to care with regards to that. Okay, so very quickly, 5 top tips. Think about mobile access delivery when choosing learning resources. We need to take into account the copyright stuff and get it there. Sometimes the suppliers haven't really thought about it. Sometimes they're using old terms and conditions that we need to update, but we need to get back and say that's not suitable for us, and they'll try and charge us more, and we say we don't have any more money. You know the story. 2, ensure data protection awareness. So, for example, a former colleague of mine decided to use WebCT discussion tools and had all 300 students in an Introduction to Psychology class feed up to the discussion list. He didn't really tell the students about what he was doing, and all these postings were to go up onto the open site, and one of the students wrote about being abused as a child, expecting this only to go to the tutor. Thankfully, he'd made an arse of the settings, and it did go to the tutor for moderation. But if he got it right, then 299 students would have seen those details. That would not have been a good situation. So because something can be done, and I tell you, an awful lot of the situations, now again, it doesn't take much to get a technical person hooked onto, by the way, like ask them, by the way, can you download the entire management information database to your mobile phone? Oh, watch this. Yeah, but it's not a good idea. So University of California at Berkeley, they lost a laptop with about 70,000 student details on it, alumni details on it. And again, it's because someone thought it'd be a good idea to download that entire database onto a laptop to muck around with. No, it's not, because it got stolen. Ensure your e-safety policies and procedures cover bring your own device. It's not just about you leave the college gates and that's nothing to do with us. Again, for staff to be aware, teaching staff to be aware when they're setting up group activities, using these methods of communication, that they could be used further, and make sure there's, first of all, acceptable use policies, discussions made with the students about acceptable behaviour, about times, about when people can be contacted, and provide a very clear mechanism when things go wrong for the victim, the person who's feeling uneasy about it, to do something. How confident are you that learners know how to report concerns? Yes, no, or don't know. If you're involved in a provider. If I get 5 students from round about your institution, ask them, if you had trouble with someone contacting you via your mobile phone, would you know who in the college to go to if that had happened as a result of college activity? Okay, that's a mix. Something for you to find out and maybe rectify. And if you don't know, then your students maybe don't either, so worthwhile looking at. Ensure your e-security and acceptable use policies are fit for BYOD. If you're using the Janet-based one, that's been updated recently to take into account BYOD in mobile devices. Make sure yours is up to date. Keep legal risk in perspective. Don't just shut everything down and switch off the 240-volt supply or 415-volt supply to stop everything happening. What should you do about risk then? Ignore it, eliminate it, think about it, take steps to manage it, or run around screaming. Right, you're all going to now press take steps to manage it. Yes, well, good luck to the 8% who think we can eliminate it. And I think running around screaming is pretty cathartic personally, and tends to get attention, which is always good. Monitor impact and effectiveness. Is it working? Is the technical steps overtaking the policy? Keep that all in mind. Ask for feedback and provide support. Again, asking learners about what they're doing and what they see as the risks is always good. How many of you have learners involved with development, review, and impact of policy in this area? Again, we find that for things like acceptable use policy, students are often not involved. Okay, always, sometimes, seldom, never. It depends if it's a quality assurance body that's asking. Oh, sorry, depends who's asking. Yep, that's fairly typical. That's, I do like the 4% who it does depend who's asking. It's wily. We have new guidance. This is the Your Staff Mobile Devices Law and Liability paper. There's a Your Students Mobile Devices Law and Liability paper. They contain lots of examples about what happens, because you don't just want to read legal guff, you want to know what to do. We have this nice sort of risk management chart. The redder the box, the worse it is. And you can gauge where you are. Of course, you might have to take risks, because if you're wanting to use new technologies in a new way, then sometimes you have to push the edges. If you're an open university or you're trying to reach out and make the best use of technology, that's more risks than if you want day release builders of a Tuesday afternoon. That's not going to require much. Well, day release builders have their own dangers, as I can testify to from experience. But anyway. Next steps then, go back and say, well done. 2, start a conversation with management. 3, rewrite a few policies. 4, monitor what's in place already. 5, get support. 6, point at the guy over there and say his problem, or problem that should include. 7, all of the above. And 8, go for lunch. Should be possibly added, but or go home because it's Friday and then Monday morning's got a new set of problems and, well, some point you'll get back to it. Okay, that's a good range and mostly within monitor what's in place already. That's good. That's in rewriting a few policies and thinking about it. I think getting a group together is actually a good section for it. If you have any questions or issues beyond today, then we're here to help. As I say, you've already paid for us through Top Slice funding. So the more use you make, the better it is, and the more we get to know about what's exercising your mind. P.S. Those clicky pads don't work as calculators. That's, don't bother taking them away if you don't mind. I once got stopped at Gatwick Airport and they said, right, want to see you working the calculator and to make sure it's legit. And say, it's not a calculator, it's a voting pad. Say, okay, we want to see you using the voting pad. I said, well, you need a computer set up. Okay, well, you can set your computer up and we'll see this. So they just wanted to see what it did. I wanted to just get my plane. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've got a little bit of time for any questions that might have been raised through that. If anyone's got any questions.
What's for lunch?
What's for lunch?
Sorry. Right, I think the only things that I can see is if you were encouraging them to use a particular application which had an effect on their phone somehow and they suffered a loss as a result, then I think mostly reputational damage of that I think is worse, or the disruption to it, but that's fairly unlikely now. Admittedly, I try and use PowerPoint Remote on my mobile phone to move the slides on, but my netbook decides that trying to use PowerPoint Remote at the same time as voting software is just too much for it. I think that's about the only one, unless there is personal information heading to it, or if you're suggesting that, well, if you are, for example, delivering an app, say the app is made available through the institution and the license does not allow organizational delivery of the app, then that's where it could become difficult. But apps, the student, they get themselves from an app store, whatever one they like, then you don't have a difficulty with, as long as they're complying with the app's terms and conditions. I think those are probably the main issues. Again, there's some fancy things. I haven't yet done it. You could actually track each person's answers from them. And again, but there is one thing, as we get more information available, I'll tell you a very brief anecdote from one of my experiences. I was an early adopter of WebCT, and I found the stats tracking page, and I could see how much time each of the students had spent on materials, and I developed some new ones, and I saw Jennifer had spent hours on this, and I saw her in the corridor. I said, Jennifer, how are you enjoying these new materials? And she said, yeah, okay, I've used them a bit. I said, no, you've used them for hours. That's saying, how you found them? I said, well, I haven't used them that much. It turned out that Jennifer had given her username and password to two of her mates who had lost theirs, which is why she had a large time using it. Now, the danger there was that we had exam boards, and if someone had failed a module, whether they got to redo it or not depended on their engagement and learning. So I would have gone along and said, Jennifer, she tried an awful lot, engaged an awful lot, should get another go. But more worryingly, the two guys that she gave the username and passwords to, I'd have gone along and say, didn't log on once, out, which is a kind of big consequence. And that's because I had breached data protection. It was before 1998 and the Act came in, by the way. So I was... it was not good practice because I didn't tell the students about the purpose for which I was using information, which might have stopped the situation and stopped, indeed, the girl breaching our terms and conditions of use by giving away her username and password, if nothing else. But those are the sort of dangers. The fact that I can look up locations of mobile devices, maybe if I have an app and a connection that does that, that doesn't mean necessarily that that's legal. Though I tell you, the ability to track where all my students were as a lecturer, that would have been great. So, yeah.
Around you guys are now having to look at staff bringing in the devices. One of the staff are now bringing devices. They can't burn their heads anymore and they're having to accept the fact this is happening. The big hoo-ha they're having with is the Freedom of Information Act. How do you get that information on somebody's device?
Yep,
This is what our IT is down there. This is what they think about. Freedom of Information Act comes in. How do I remember staff to get that information on the device? Is there anything I can get back to them and try and
luckily enough, there's a whole load of stuff that comes out of the council area because they have the issue with councillors and their own mobile devices that they use. On the whole, first of all, freedom of information applies to things which are held by the institution. So, as a general rule, things that are on mobile devices that do not belong to and over which the institution has no control, stuff is not held by it. So the University of Strathclyde, my employer, does not have access to my mobile phone.
We have got some devices which are used by management, however we do have, so we've got two sides of it. That side of it, and the other side of it is staff who have got their own devices and bring them in and access the college email or go to Campbell Cloud and access the college network and therefore have been ready to stuff. This is what they're sort of looking. So you're saying if it's a person's own device, it's not covered at the college.
That's right. The chances are it will appear actually on the server as well in the institution that you do hold that information there. So there's a technical question as to the multiple locations it's held. The fact that it's cached on the mobile device probably isn't the only copy. And that's, you've got that. If it is the only copy, then that is not held by the institution. So that's the good news there. Now, if it's a device provided by the institution that is held by the institution, and also we're going to get in the complex area where part of your mobile device may be held by the institution because it's controlled by the institution. So if you have the ability to partition and protect an area on someone's device, and again this is a technology that's growing to be the work area, then that, and again there's not a definitive ruling on this, but it looks like that will be held to be part of the institution. There is the technical question as to how you find it, but then again, it says it goes down to the question of, well, sometimes freedom of information requests involve asking people, what do you have in your filing cabinet? And again, it could be a case in that if there's not a technical ability to search, saying to people, do you have information that meets this freedom of information request?
I think that's about time we have. Lunch is now being served.